In a world divided by ancient powers, where humans walk alongside creatures of legend, a war brews beneath the surface. Dragons and wolves, bound by ancient bloodlines, face their greatest threat, an enemy that seeks to unravel their very existence. And at the heart of it all, a chosen one emerges, bound by fate to confront a dark queen who would see them all burn. I stepped into the dimly lit room where the air felt thick with unspoken worry. Apala lay on the bed, wrapped tightly in a sheet, his face swollen and bruised. Luke sat beside him in a chair, looking tense and helpless, while Azazel stood at the foot of the bed, her expression hard but her eyes soft with concern. As I moved closer, Luke glanced up at me, his face lined with stress. "He hasn't woken up yet," Azazel said quietly, breaking the silence. Luke began, his voice faltering, but I silenced him with a raised hand, stepping forward to place my hand on Apala's forehead. His skin was cold and clammy, his face a patchwork of bruises and dark shadows under his eyes. There were no words for this moment, nothing I could say that would make a difference. All I could do was look at him and feel the weight of my own failure. I turned to leave, closing the door behind me with a sense of finality, as if shutting out a painful chapter of my life. Outside, the cold air hit me, sharp and bracing, stirring a primal urge within. I transformed into a wolf, feeling the familiar rush of power as my body shifted, fur rippling in the breeze. I needed to hunt, not out of hunger, but out of a desperate need to destroy something, to vent the anger and frustration churning inside me. Anything to take my mind off things, off her. The mere thought of her made my blood boil. If I saw her again, I knew I wouldn't be able to hold back my fury. But why was I even surprised? Of course I would attack her, and of course she would retaliate. That's who we were. That was our fate, an endless cycle of violence. I prowled through the underbrush, my senses heightened, every sound and scent magnified. I caught the scent of a small animal, a weasel. I stalked it, my movements silent, each step measured, every muscle tensed for the kill. When I pounced, feeling the creature's bones crunch between my jaws, a dark satisfaction settled in my chest. It wasn't the big things, I realized. It would be the small things that would give her away. Not grand acts of destruction, but the unnoticed killings, the missing people, the animal carcasses left in the woods. She had to feed, just like any predator. And if she was taking the form of a dragon, she would need to feed voraciously to sustain herself, to grow. When I saw her last, she seemed smaller than I remembered. Maybe she hadn't been able to feed properly because she had to hide. If she was near a city or town, she would have to be careful, to hide her kills. But eventually, her hunger would betray her. She would need to eat, and her kills would start to pile up, even if they were small. I had set a trap, but she slipped right through, attacking one of my own without me even sensing her presence. How did she know where we were? I should have been more careful. My recklessness put my people in danger, and now Apala had paid the price. I broke into a run, my powerful legs propelling me forward, the wind whipping through my fur. As I neared the ranch, I slowed, taking in the scene. John and Azazel were already in their dragon forms, their massive bodies casting long shadows in the fading light. Thatch was pacing on the roof in human form, her eyes scanning the horizon. John, with his pale, ghostly wings slanted downward, took to the skies as I approached, leaving the rest of us grounded. It was a surprising move, but there was no time to dwell on it. I reached out with my mind, speaking to them telepathically. "What's going on?" "You tell me," Azazel responded, her voice sharp in my mind. "What are you planning?" I asked cautiously, sensing the tension crackling in the air. "We thought about training," Azazel replied, her tone tight with frustration. "But our tempers are too short for that. We'd rather do what feels natural." "The answer is no," I said firmly. "But she hurt Apala!" John's voice was a growl, anger boiling beneath his words. I said no. Unless we all attack her together, no one goes after her. We don't know enough yet to risk any of you. She could have wiped you all out if she wanted to. She's clearly trying to pick us off one by one. "Then let's give her what she doesn't want," John insisted. "Let's attack now." "Right, and walk straight into her trap," I shot back. The silence that followed was heavy with tension. "I just lost Apala. I'm not losing anyone else," I said, my voice breaking slightly. "Easy there, stud." Azazel tried to lighten the mood, but her attempt fell flat. "He's just a little injured, that's all." But it didn't feel that way to me. The fear of losing more of my people weighed heavily on my heart. I changed the subject. "Where's Luke?" Azazel turned her long neck around the house, searching. "Luke?" I called out. Yeah, I'm here. What? Luke's voice came from somewhere behind the house. Good, I said, relieved. John Azazel, keep an eye on the skies. Everyone else, stay put. I swallowed the weasel whole, feeling its last shudders against my tongue as I transformed back into my human form and walked inside. Drogon was sitting at the kitchen table, staring blankly at the wall. The others in the room avoided my eyes, their fear palpable. I wasn't sure why, but I could sense their unease. I sat down next to Drogon, and we both stared into space, the silence between us heavy with unspoken words. So, how was your hunt? He finally asked, breaking the silence. Dead on arrival, I replied, my voice flat. The animal was dead on arrival? He asked, confused. No, I said, shaking my head. Forget it, Drogon. I want to ask for guidance, but it feels weak to do that. Asking for help doesn't make you weak, he said, his voice gentle but firm. Being weak makes you weak. Am I weak? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. No, he said softly. You're just hurting. We all do sometimes. When I brought Apala back here, Draco looked genuinely shocked. He followed us inside as Thatch and the others worked tirelessly to treat his wounds. Injuries received in our spiritual forms were always more severe than they appeared in human form. When Apala shifted back to his human form, the extent of his injuries became painfully clear. Burn marks, scratches, deep gashes, broken bones. We bandaged his wounds as best as we could, trying to prevent them from worsening or getting infected. If he had been purely human, he would have died from these injuries. But as a dragon, his spirit would heal him, given enough time. Draco had been oddly detached, speaking mechanically about Apala's recovery. Given time, the spirit within him will heal his wounds and restore his skin to an unblemished state, he had said, his voice devoid of emotion. But every time I looked at Draco, I saw a coldness in his eyes. Was he angry? Or was he in shock, unable to express his feelings? Since then, I'd heard he hadn't been well and had secluded himself in his room, refusing to see anyone. Still, I couldn't help but wonder. Have you heard anything from Draco? I asked Drogon. He left, Drogon replied. When? Sometime early this morning. A surge of panic gripped me. You don't think he... No, Drogon said firmly. He's not the type. Draco is methodical. He wouldn't seek revenge. Besides, he wouldn't know where to start looking for her. I think you're facing the same problem, aren't you? He was right. Everyone was begging me to send someone after her, to at least track her movements. But that was too risky. She could easily know she was being followed and turn on them. If she could take down Apala alone, she was a match for any of my disciples, and possibly even me. We needed all our strength intact. Losing even one of us would cost us dearly. If she was acting alone, she would try to eliminate us one by one. The day dragged on, every second feeling like an eternity. Finally, Apala opened his eyes. His recount of the attack was chilling, painting a picture of a far more formidable dragon than we had anticipated. We need to prepare, I said, turning to the group. John, gather information. Find out if there are any reports of missing people or animals, anything unusual. We need to know where she's hiding. John nodded and hurried off to begin his search. As the rest of us prepared, a sense of urgency settled over the group. We were getting closer to finding her, and we needed to be ready. The sun was setting as we took to the skies, our wings slicing through the cool evening air. We flew close to the coastline, staying low to avoid detection. The journey across Europe was long and exhausting, but we didn't stop. Not until we reached the English shore. When we finally touched down, we shifted back into our human forms. Several cars were waiting for us off the beaten path, sent by the order to take us to our destination. We climbed in, driving through the narrow, winding roads of the English countryside, our hearts pounding with anticipation. We arrived at a small wooden shack with no windows, the meeting place set by Elder Drake Gosh. We gathered outside, waiting. Me, my disciples, Draco, Drogon. The air was thick with tension. Elder Gok emerged from the shack, a tall man with a heavy beard. One of the local dragon morphs found a freshly killed deer, he began, his voice low and serious. It had deep slashes across its back and sides. The way it was tangled up in the disturbed ground suggested it had been thrown from a great distance. He reported it to me. It seemed possible, especially since John had mentioned this being a regular occurrence. The local paper talked about it frequently, rumors and superstitions spreading about the strange events in the area. We've prepared lodging for you to rest and prepare, Elder Gok continued. We'll set out tomorrow at dawn to begin the search. If she's here, we're close. I nodded, feeling a mix of relief and dread. We were so close, too close to turn back now. The next morning, we set out towards the Helvellyn Mountains. The English countryside was a blur of green and gray as we drove, the landscape shifting from rolling hills to rugged mountains. Patterdale was a bustling area, frequented by travelers. It would be the perfect place for an ambush, close to the ocean and away from prying eyes. On the eastern side, we found ourselves in a dense forest, the trees tall and imposing. Houses were few and far between, vast fields of crops flourishing under the cold atmosphere. We arrived at a large house with a rough, dark red roof and an attic window bordered in white. The green-shaded walls greeted us with a peculiar charm. There we met Duncan Gulvres, the dragon morph who had made the report. Wearing a thick sweater, his black hair was unkempt, his dark eyes intense. He shook all our hands, even embracing a few of us. Drogon and the others looked surprised by his warmth. When he saw Draco, however, he paused, nodding respectfully. Draco nodded back, but didn't extend his hand. "You mentioned a report on the dragon we're seeking?" Draco asked, walking past him. Duncan told us what he knew of the ghost as we stood on the front porch. No one has seen it and lived to tell the tale, but they hear the screeching, feel the rush of wind, catch the sound of it tearing through the air. There had been reports of missing people, their remains found weeks later, mutilated and chewed on by local wolves. "That sounds like a cover-up," I whispered. "It's too convenient. And why are we only hearing about this now? Why hasn't it made the news?" "Back in the day, it wasn't so bad," Duncan replied. "But as she grows, her territory and wrath expand. It's different now. It's never been this bad." Drogon nodded. "She's growing, so her appetite will increase. This will only get worse." The Dragon King spoke up. "We can't allow this to continue. We need to keep the world of spirits hidden from human minds and eyes." I asked, "Does she live on the mountain?" "I think so," Duncan replied. There was only one way to find out. We needed a closer look to determine if she was hiding up there. We decided to set out at dusk. If nothing else, we could at least feed. The sun was setting as we set out toward the mountains. We shifted into our wolf forms, moving swiftly through the dense forest. The trees closed in around us, the path rugged and treacherous. The cold air bit at our fur, but we pressed on, driven by a sense of urgency. Suddenly, Thatch's voice echoed in my mind. "Drake, stop! I see something!" I slowed to a halt, the others stopping beside me. "What is it?" I asked, scanning the darkness. "There's a dragon," she replied, her voice tense. "It's not red, I don't recognize it." "Everyone, get to Thatch!" I ordered. We moved quickly, closing the distance between us. I saw it then, a large, dark figure moving among the trees. A dragon, but not the queen. This one was different, darker, its tail spiked. "Who are you?" I demanded, stepping forward. The dragon's eyes glinted in the darkness. "Should I not ask you the same question?" "We're looking for the queen," I replied. "Do you know where she is?" The dragon snorted. "I know her, but I won't tell you anything." "Why not?" I pressed. "Because you are my enemy," he replied coldly, "and I cannot let you meet her. You will die here." Before I could respond, Apala lunged forward, Luke close behind. The dragon took to the air, moving swiftly among the trees. The battle began. We chased the dragon into a cavern, the walls closing in around us. The space was tight, the air thick with tension. The dragon, Garth, moved swiftly, using the tight space to his advantage. We struggled to keep up, our movements restricted by the narrow walls. Garth twisted and turned, his tail whipping around, knocking us aside. Luke was thrown to the ground, Apala sent crashing into a wall. I leaped forward, trying to grab his tail, but he swung up, dodging my grasp. "This is interesting," Garth said, almost amused. "What are you playing at?" I demanded, panting. Garth landed on a spike jutting from the ceiling, his eyes fixed on me. "I have no choice but to kill you," he said. "It's what she wants." I felt a surge of anger. "Take me to her. Spare my friends and I'll come willingly." Garth stared at me, his eyes narrowing. "You're the chosen one, aren't you? Foolish enough to think you can bargain with me." "I thought you said it didn't matter," I challenged. Garth hesitated. "If I take you alone, she'll kill you," he said. "But your friends will be safe." I knew it was a lie. "I won't let my friends die for me," I said firmly. "Take me, but let them go." Garth's eyes flickered with something. Pity, perhaps. "You remind me of myself," he said quietly. "I'll let you go this time, but next time you won't be so lucky." Before I could respond, a roar echoed through the cavern. A massive ball of fire exploded in front of us, sending me flying backward. Garth shouted, "Yine, you bastard!" A black dragon burst through the smoke, colliding with Garth. The two dragons clashed, their roars echoing through the cavern. Rocks began to fall from the ceiling, the ground shaking beneath us. The cavern began to collapse around us, rocks falling, dust and smoke filling the air. I called out to the others, "Get out, now!" Thatch grabbed me, pulling me toward the exit. The others followed, dodging falling debris. We barely made it out before the entire cavern came crashing down, sealing off the entrance. As we regrouped outside, I realized with horror that Azazel was missing. "Azazel!" I shouted, but there was no answer. The battles have ended, but the scars remain. Though victories were won, the war is far from over. In the shadows, a dark force still lingers, waiting for its moment to strike again. The chosen one must rise, for the future of both dragons and men rests in the balance. But for now, they prepare for what lies ahead. The path to destiny is never easy. It is forged in flame and blood.